Hey guys, it's Mike from That's Cool Vintage Collectibles, and today on the show we're going to be talking about the legendary Vox Mark III guitar known as the Teardrop. Stay tuned. So the Vox Mark III guitar, or the Teardrop, this is actually the third time I've owned this guitar. It's a little bit of a story. I'll tell you a bit about that today, as well as some of the history of where these guitars were kind of made famous and their significance in the history of rock and roll. In 1962, the Vox guitar was released originally as one called the Phantom, which looks different than this. And shortly thereafter, about a year later, Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones had this guitar made specifically for him, and it was a prototype version, so it's a little bit different in a couple of areas, but it basically shares the same idea. It did not have the whammy bar, and it was just a flat bridge on it. But it was quite a design that was also made in a 12-string guitar as well, which is kind of cool. And then it was discontinued by the 1970s. Now, some players continued to use these past this. I know Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers use Teardrop guitars, and so does Stevie Van Zandt with Bruce Springsteen's band. So they are not uncommon. A lot of indie rock bands use them. They're a very interesting guitar. I don't think the early ones were all that playable compared to the reissues. The reissues seem to be quite a bit more playable than the originals, although I've never played an original, so I don't know. But from what I've read, that seems to be the general comment on that. And in the late 1990s, Vox reissued these, and that's where I got mine. I bought it at a local guitar shop in the late 1990s, and I just thought it was the coolest looking guitar. I just thought that's the Brian Jones guitar. I had to have this thing, and was immediately in love with the guitar. I just thought it was a fantastic looking guitar, and the color was really cool. I know they made them in black, white, green, and this light blue color, and I think there's even a red one as well, if I remember, but I can't remember seeing that or not. But very cool guitars, and quite a statement to be playing. They're difficult to play sitting down without a strap, but they're great on stage. So this guitar and I have had a long road together. I originally bought this guitar in the late 1990s at a local guitar shop in my area. And a few years later, I hadn't really fallen out of love with it, let's say. But I wasn't playing it that much, and I thought, I gotta clear out some gear, and it was time for a gear purge, and this went. And I sold it to a student of mine. I'm a guitar teacher. And I sold it to a guitar student of mine, and she had it for a few years, and eventually was going to sell it herself, and I thought, I miss this guitar, I'll have it back, and I bought it back from her. And so then I owned it again for the second time, and I had it for a number of years after that, almost 10 years after that, maybe actually a little longer. And at that point, again, gear purge time, I sort of had enough of it, and I wasn't thinking I would play it that much. And I sold it again to a fella that I knew, and that went sort of right during the pandemic, actually. And at that time, I was kind of in and out of work a little bit because of the pandemic and lockdowns in my area and things like that. And so I purged a bit of gear just to basically live off of and have some income coming in, and this was part of the purge. And about a year later, I was told by a bunch of people, hey, your guitar's in a thrift store on the main street of my town. And they had kind of identified this guitar with me because it's such a rare and unique looking guitar. You don't see it every day. And it was sitting in a shop window on the downtown of my main street, in a thrift shop of all places, which was kind of bizarre. So I went in to inquire what was going on, and the guy I had sold it to was pretty financially stable, and after the pandemic had kind of cleared, he donated the guitar to the thrift store to help them get back on their feet, which is a good thing. But what they were asking for it was just astronomical, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm gonna. I guess that's the end of this guitar journey for me. This one, and that was in the spring, and I sort of waited, and I kept driving by and seeing it in the window. And we have a lot of tourists coming to my area in the summer, and a lot of tourists go to that shop on the main street. It's like thrift, antiques, that kind of stuff, used clothing, and it just was still there and still there because it was priced unbelievably high, and it wasn't realistic, and any guitar player would have been interested in it but not pulled the trigger at that price. So after about 5 months, I went back in and made them an offer on the guitar, and I said I'd be comfortable buying it back at this price to own it again. I explained I used to own it, and they went for it. So I got it back, which was fantastic, and I was just so thrilled to have it and to keep it at my studio again. And I should never have sold it in the first place. It was it's too hard to come by and too rare a guitar, so I was really happy to get it back. So this guitar is set up very much like a Stratocaster. It's got a Strat bridge with whammy bar and the same kind of idea on the back, the bolt-on neck and the plate with the springs underneath. 3 pickups. They sound very Strat-like, but they are different. And the 5-way switch, like a Stratocaster would have. So it's very much like a Strat with a different shape. They play pretty well. They play, to me, they kind of play like a high-end Squire. I think that's kind of what they sound and feel like. They're not certainly a high-end guitar, but they're cool, and they're very unique, and the shape is one of a kind. And I just think they're a real fun guitar, and so that's how I've ended up owning it so many times. But it's not going anywhere now, and my daughter's just learning how to play guitar. I think it'd be a great guitar for her, and it's just going to stay here. It's going to be in the collection here for a long time to come, and probably forever. So this one, I'm thrilled to get back. Have you ever had a guitar that you've gotten rid of and bought back? And I can see every guitar player watching today nodding their head and saying, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's hard to let go of them, and you do have a bond with them. I don't perform with it that often. I've played a handful of shows with this guitar, but it's great. I really like it, and I love the color and the look and the whole thing. So there you go, the Vox MKIII, otherwise known as the Teardrop. And that is today's collectible on That's Cool Vintage Collectibles. Brand new channel. This is March now, so we started in the end of December. And thank you all for the support. And it's everything collectible. We talk about records and guitars and rock and roll memorabilia, but then we also talk about sports memorabilia, sports cards, antiques, and other vintage items. Basically anything that I think is kind of cool and like to collect. So that's what we'll do on the show. I'm also going to get into talking about some historical locations I've been in, places like that as well, because I think that's interesting, and you might find it interesting as well. So appreciate everybody watching and the support so far, and keep on collecting.